Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the business connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil, now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American in Brazil for many years, and known as the King of Networking, speaker and author on networking. A professional business network is made up of people we meet every day. Our network grows and is sustained by maintaining contact with those connections. Podcasting is a modern form of networking. I'm talking from the city of Campinas in the state of São Paulo, Brazil, so when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Today's guest is Scott Dalgleish, and he's the head of marketing at the Scottish Business Network and is talking with us today from Edinburgh in Scotland. The Scottish Business Network is an international membership organization that aims to connect Scottish business leaders from around the world with the ambitious entrepreneurs in Scotland to businesses and persons throughout the world. His role is to share the incredible stories of SBN members with the thousands of Scots around the world. Scottish Business Network recently embarked on a global survey of senior Scots to try to create a platform that businesses in Scotland can use when looking internationally. So with that, Scott, thanks and welcome to being part of Talk to Brazil.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
For our listeners, Scott, I'd like to mention that actually in April, I interviewed your father, Russell Dalgleish. He had come to Brazil, was here for a very brief business stop, a presentation, and it was through that I found him, interviewed him, and we talked about really business amongst and between countries and persons and getting out and knowing things and knowing about the places. And it was really through that and your efforts of promoting business for Scottish companies that I think you're an example to be followed. And I'd like to continue highlighting that even within Brazilian business community, and more specifically within the area where I am, which is called the RMC, the Greater Campinas Metropolitan Region. Because what I found, and you know, that each person and each company has a story. So what are some of the stories of Scottish businesses?
So I'm glad to be here to talk about these sort of things. I'm a very passionate Scot, and I think that there's so much exciting things happening within Scotland and within our own network that I'm just delighted to be able to talk about. Mm-hmm. So, as you say, Russell, my father was across in Brazil doing a presentation about leadership, I believe, and right. We've just sort of kept in touch since then, you and I, Tom. So Russell and myself, as you say, work for we sort of run the Scottish Business Network, and I head up the marketing, and Russell's our chairman. So within our network, we have a lot of Scottish companies who are very, very ambitious about looking to do more work internationally and sort of grow their network across the world. And as you pointed out there, one of the things we've done to help facilitate this is embark on our global survey. So we tried to reach out to as many senior Scots around the world in every different location to try and find out what business opportunities and what trends are happening in that part of the world, so we can then build a report to act as a platform to help these Scottish companies go to new markets. And it's something that's very, very important currently in the UK due to a lot of the political uncertainty. People are looking further afield than the norm. So I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about that.
Well, what were the results? Obviously, I was part of that, and for our listeners, I'm half Scottish. My grandfather is also from Edinburgh. My great-grandfather was from Edinburgh. So that's really my link. And as you mentioned, you're a passionate Scot. I'm not really sure if there are any non-passionate Scots out there.
That's very true.
And what I've mentioned, obviously, about being Scottish, people Here in Brazil, it's the same thing. Everybody sort of melts everything together. You're an American, and American's one big thing. If you're Brazilian, it's one big thing. And when I'm talking from the Brazilian's perspective, obviously Scotland is known from football. But not many times Brazilian business persons separate Scotland as a country and as a business opportunity. And so I think it is good for what you have done is to reaching out, because obviously the passion is for business. And I've also not met a business person who's not passionate. So these things have to melt together, whether you're Scottish or Brazilian or American or whatever. Business is done between persons.
That's very true. And what we find as well is that people are always happy to share advice and help. So we look for things that we have in common. So it could be that maybe we're from the same city, maybe we're in the same sector, or maybe we're from the same country, or that's where we've always looked to say. So I can give you an example. We have a member who recently went over to Dubai for the first time. And they were going over there to showcase some of their furniture. They're a company called 1718 Limited, and one of the things that Scotland's really proving to be innovative at currently is the design sector. We've got another member called Bespoke Atelier who are doing some incredible things with fabric design. But our member was going over to Dubai for the first time. We said, we know a member over there, we'll introduce you via email. And the idea wasn't that he might set up some meetings for you. It wasn't that he might be a prospective sale. It was that he would be someone on the ground who can offer you advice and just act as that way to help.
Right.
So I think it gives you that added confidence when trying to do something for the first time, which I think is something that we all need.
No, and I think that's the way it works, and it should work. Obviously, when you set up this survey, you don't know, or you didn't know, where the Scots are in the world, did you? You just put that out there and hope to bring the answers in.
So there was a lot of hope from our end. We know that traditionally places like the United States, they have a lot of Scots and Irish and Celtic, people from the Celtic regions, because of all the immigration that happened in the past. But that's similar in places like Australia. But that's a very that's part of our history now. So what about the last 30 years? Have people been moving into new markets? So we just thought there's got to be lots of Scots out there, and let's make this survey and try and reach out to them. And with the help of people like yourself, Tom, it's been shared and shared and shared again. And we've really been blown away by the results so far. We've hit far more people than we could ever have thought. So and we've hit far more regions as well. So it's really giving us a much greater scope of the opportunities around the world than we could have hoped for.
Well, and to be fair, obviously, the survey was directed to Scots, but as you mentioned, when I received a copy of the survey, it's not just for Scottish descendants. You're really out there trying to reach to people, to business persons, wherever they are. And that was one of the drives I felt from my networking and my group here in Brazil, and more specifically in the area of Campinas, of sending out that survey. And I heard back from many of them that they have completed the survey. So they're interested in business. They're interested in Scotland.
Exactly. And you'll be a great example of this, Tom. You don't have to be a descendant of a place to have a very strong affinity to it. We find a lot of people who perhaps studied in Scotland still look back really fondly on that experience, or people who've got extended family who are Scottish, for example, a husband's family or a colleague's family. So there's other people out there who aren't necessarily descendants of Scotland who still have valuable input that's just been incredible to hear from.
No, I think our heritage is of value, and business ethic. It goes back to that value of really what you profess and where you're from. So that's good. So the turnout from the survey, you said, it surprised you. So what's the next step? What's the next step with the survey?
So we we're doing the survey in part with a research group called Momentous Change, who are also based in Scotland. And as of November and moving into the Christmas period, they're going to be analysing the results and building a report that sort of outlines what we've learned. And that will be released in early 2020. And we've decided, we've never been one for, we're an organisation that's here to help. So
right.
That's going to be publicly available to everybody, because the idea is to say that there might be opportunities in different parts of the world that you've never explored before. Right. Well, we've actually heard from people who live there or are based there and have an affinity to Scotland who want to say, come here and do this. So we've had an immense response from the likes of African nations, specifically in North Africa, the likes of, we've had great response from Morocco, with a company who came out of St Andrews University, who then said, we've actually got a Scottish group who meet up every month. I'll shed that round with everybody. So that's been great, whereas we would have never suspected that to be a hotbed of Scots. Mm-hmm. There's a massive Scottish association in Australia which focuses on the people in the rural areas in the centre. So although there's not a lot of people in the middle of Australia because of the landscape, there's actually a Scottish community there, which we had no idea existed until I think it was much like you got in touch with yourself, a LinkedIn message. I think that ended up spreading that around. So we've been overwhelmed with the response, and in early 2020 we'll be releasing this report, which will hopefully outline the different areas and aspects and trends in business and also current opportunities. Mm-hmm. Because what we've found most is that we're able to now have feedback about gaps in markets, because although finding out where an opportunity is valuable, it is equally as valuable finding out where there's not an opportunity, because then you don't have to spend time and money or resource to then find out that, my product won't sell there, for example.
Right. And also, what I'd like to mention up front to our listeners, you have a website. The Scottish Business Network website is the three letters SBN.Scot, SCOT. So that would be www.sbn.scot. And I want to mention that because I also follow you and Russell. You're very active on LinkedIn, and you post frequently about we're talking, one thing is the survey, the other thing are the physical activities and meetings that you generate, not only in Scotland, but within the UK. So you have many presentations that you've made in London, and you create a physical presence and activities amongst the group. So for our listeners, I think going to your site and being able to follow either Scott or Russell to see what's happening. So if on a visit to Scotland, to see what's happening and meet up and maybe go to one of these events.
Yeah, that would be terrific. So we exist to talk about the exciting things our members do. So as you see, our website's a great hotbed for talking about the different things that our members are doing. And we are not specific to any sector. So there's engineers in there, there's food and drink companies in there, there's design companies, there's tech companies, there's all sorts. And we just exist to brag about what they're up to, essentially. So it's a great reason.
Well, somebody has to do that, right? That if you don't...
Exactly, yeah. And as a nation, we're not very good at talking ourselves up, so it's easier for us to do than it is for them.
Well, what I say in my networking, our best marketing director is our mother. And
yeah, exactly.
So mothers are the persons, they're the marketing persons that go out and talk about their kids, whether the other person wants to hear about it or not. But I think that's essential because you mentioned that, and I feel that in Brazil, that's one of the things that drove me to create Talk to Brazil. Obviously, for the similar reasons, Brazilians are very active, they're very prolific in what they're doing, a great business environment, but they tend to shy away of promoting themselves. And we're talking to you here from Campinas, and one of the things that I drive to do is to to let the world know that Campinas exists, what's in this region. It's a great region, all more than 3 million inhabitants. The city of Campinas has more than 1,300,000 inhabitants. A lot of activity. But people tend to shy away from letting the world know. And I said, if you don't do that, nobody finds out. So I said, the best thing to do is to take your mother to events and let her talk.
Yeah, let her meet you because she'll brag more than you ever will. But I mean, it's a great example of this is what we tell to a lot of our members as well. You just mentioned that it's a region in Brazil of about 3 million people. Scotland's is a country of 5 million people. So I mean, if you look at different parts of the world, there's just the sheer opportunity that can be out there if you just look, which I think is what we try to encourage people to do. So for example, you might think people who don't know a lot about Brazil might think, well, Brazil's a massive country. There must be a lot of people in the big cities, but there's regions, not just cities. It's a massive world.
Yeah, and we talk, and I talked about that with Russell. Many times we're talking about international business. We're talking about a physical product that you want to export or import. But today there's so many startups, there's so many service-oriented companies, and I'm sure in Edinburgh and throughout Scotland you have startups working from their shared desk with someone, and they're having a brilliant idea. They're generating something different that can change the world. And you don't necessarily have to set up a factory and put in machines to do that.
Exactly. In fact, we've got Scotland has got a very traditional finance sector. It has for hundreds of years, but now we're heading into the 21st century. A lot of fintech companies started to set up alongside that. So we've got so much interesting things happening in financial technology in Scotland, which is a service. So there might be different financial regulations in different countries, but as you say, there's no factories having to produce these cloud-based technologies. So there's a lot of exciting things that these companies are doing, which is going to end up affecting far more people than that exist within the Scottish borders.
But, so you see that. So in Edinburgh, we can say there is the startup community. There are the younger persons that have a great idea, 15, 16-year-olds, and sit down, open up their laptop, take their smartphone, and they're in business.
Yes, it's a massively entrepreneurially driven country, specifically Edinburgh and Glasgow, just because they're the big cities here. I think a lot of it's to do with there is a lot of support. The government is always pushing to support self-starters in business. So there's lots of free advice you can get. There's lots of grants available and that sort of thing. But there's also Scotland as a country has a lot of universities, which means that we're producing quite a lot of high qualified graduates who see the opportunities of starting your own business. So in fact, the amount of people who sort of come to Scotland, do a couple of years in university, and then think to themselves, you know what, I've got an idea for a business. Maybe I won't finish university and I'll go and do that instead. But it's a bit varying, but it just means that it's a hotbed of that sort of thing.
Well, even in the cold weather, it's a hotbed, right?
That's true, yes. It's relatively cold, but it's windy more than anything else.
Well, wind is good. That's technology. When you're talking about wind technology, and in Brazil, in the northern part and the southern part of the country, we have the wind alternative energies. Wind has become fantastic. The more wind you have, the more energy you generate. Scotland creates so much energy from wind turbines because we've got something like 75% of all the wind in Europe hits the north coast of Scotland. So it was just an opportunity to jump on. But I mean, it also that sort of opportunity sort of brings out better ideas and bigger ideas. So although a wind turbine is one big massive piece of engineering, there's lots of bits inside it which could be improved upon. So there's the north of Scotland specifically have incubator hubs for green energy. In fact, there's a company called Capture Mobility, which came out of Pakistan, moved to Scotland because they developed wind turbines to go in between massive highways in countries which traditionally don't have a lot of wind.
So we do lots in Pakistan was the same, but they do lots in India as well, because it's just massive roads with no wind, but the cars are generating something to move, so they sort of sit in the middle of highways and then take that wind energy. But it's because since Scotland quite value renewable energy technology quite highly, there was an opportunity for them to move to Scotland and join an incubator and really help boost their product.
Oh, that's fantastic. But that's exactly to the point that where sometimes we think we have a disadvantage, we actually have an advantage.
True, yeah.
And that's the opportunity. I think that's fantastic. So you're pleased with your survey. You're pleased with the actions. What has been the feedback from your members?
So they're getting quite excited because we've been talking about it for a long time. So they're getting excited to see the results. They've all filled out the survey as well and are now quite interested to see if we can uncover opportunities in different places that they might not be aware of. So they've been quite interested with that. But also, as you say, with these physical events that we do, a lot of that is to try and bring international experts or people who've got international experience to talk to Scottish companies about how it works. So we're actually doing an event next week called the Returning Scots Panel, where we've got 4 people who went and had careers or started businesses in different parts of the world who've now returned, and they can then say, so we've got somebody who they grew a business in Manila, someone who's got a lot of experience in North Africa, someone from the Middle East, and someone who worked in the finance sector in New York. So it's different parts of the world with different customs and different working environments. So hopefully we'll shed some light on what's happening in those parts of the world.
And that's what makes business go round and round and round.
Exactly. And as you said earlier, it's all about people. It'd be nice because even when you think, oh, that company could buy my product, you're really thinking of the person within that company who's going to believe in my product is going to buy it, not the company as a whole.
There's really 2 sides of that same coin. Will they buy my product or why won't they buy my product? You can get feedback. Feedback, I think, is essential for products, for services, for anything. Learning the different customs, as you mentioned, the different opportunities that are out there in the world that many times within our own environment, we don't perceive that. A business person doesn't perceive that. And you really need to get out and share and see. And that's the advantage. That's it. So, and I think the advantage that you have, obviously, the opening that this survey is bringing and your organization, is to make Scottish business seem more friendly to persons. So Campinas, we're driving for that. We're talking the Campinas-friendly environment and what you're working on, both you and Russell, a friendly environment, and that's how business starts.
Exactly. So it's just all about getting the name out there. I mean, we've never taken advantage of the international reputation that Scotland have. We're known for, everybody's heard of whiskey and they associate whiskey with high quality. Everyone's heard of, Edinburgh is a massive tourist destination, as is the north of Scotland. So people do associate positive things with Scotland. It's just not necessarily in business. So we're trying to change that mindset within the business community.
And I think it's working, and that's really part of the driving part of the work is somebody has to do it, and it's either you or somebody's mother. So go out and get out and tell the story, right?
Exactly.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time, but thanks for sharing. Thanks for being a point of contact for business persons throughout the world. And it was a real pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit more about Scottish business.
And we'll certainly be in touch. And as I've mentioned, I've also placed you in contact with many of my contacts because people need to know and meet people, and we'll continue to do that.
100%.
So thank you again. I also like to invite our listeners to visit our website, which is www.talktobrazil.com, where you'll find today's interview with Scott Dalgleish. And Scott is ScottDalgleish. Dalgleish. With more information about the Scottish Business Network, you'll find a link to his LinkedIn profile. And again, mentioning the sbn.scot website, which is full of information about Scottish business. You can also find this and our previous shows of Talk to Brazil on Spotify, Apple Podcast, TuneIn, Himalaya, CastBox, Google Podcast, and many others. And thank you, our audience, and remind everyone that today's program was brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, and Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, which is focusmi.com. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.